there is a lot happening at the state court level. We'll start again with Georgia. So if you're just joining us, there was a case coming up for, I guess this was coming up, and it was scheduled today. What was the next? The next hearing was going to be on December 5th.
Right.
And this was going to be the next hearing on whether Fani Willis at the Georgia Appeals Court has to recuse herself or should remove herself from the case involving President Trump after the issue with Nathan Wade and the almost $1 million paid to him to be a RICO specialist, even though he'd never done a RICO case. And this is not even the appeal on the actual charges she brought. So this case has gotten really delayed. And the question now, Harry, I think people are probably asking is this delayed because the entire case falls, like some of what you saw with Jack Smith and others, that these cases fall because they used evidence and witnesses and testimony that the Supreme Court then said should not be allowed and cannot be allowed in court?
I think that is the answer. So I would argue that the Supreme Court has ruled very definitively that when presidents engage in official acts, that conduct is arguably immune from basically scrutiny by the prosecutor. Also, when presidents engage in unofficial acts, but within the purview of their constitutional power, there is a presumption that those acts are also immune. And so if we look at the Fani Willis case in Georgia, I think it is clear beyond question that the prosecution essentially relied on official conduct by President Trump. So arguably, that case should be voided. But we have the additional complication, of course, of Fani Willis's relationship with Nathan Wade. And as you correctly point out, Mr. Wade received approximately $1 million, and there is evidence in the record suggesting that Fani Willis benefited from those monies. They went on trips together, they went out for dinner together, and of course, Mr. Wade paid at least for some of those expenses. So I suspect the Georgia Court of Appeals has read the tea leaves. They recognize this case is really going nowhere. And what they may wind up doing is remanding the case to the district court, Judge McAfee, so that he can dispose of this particular case. So I think at the end of the day, Fani Willis will be entitled to experience, and the Georgia taxpayers will be out $1 million. And essentially what we've seen is a waste of money.
What happens to all those other people, too? I mean, did they have any recourse? There were people who pled guilty. There were people who have spent, hundreds of thousands of dollars on legal fees. Can they then go back and try to recover those from the state?
I think they should be able to. I'm no expert on Georgia procedure, but if I were their attorney, I would pursue this case at the trial court level, asking Judge McAfee to dismiss the charges and basically remove all penalties. I don't know Georgia law sufficiently, but it may be possible for them to bring a claim for a malicious prosecution against Fani Willis and her team.
And Jordan, what you have to look at here is the entire context of what's going on as well. This, as Harry brings up, when you look at this order on the face of it, it may strike some people as, well, they canceled the hearing on the appeal. So isn't that a negative for President Trump? As you read the tea leaves, as Professor Hutchison brings up, it appears that the appellate court is now looking at the entire context of where this case is. One, the immunity ruling from the Supreme Court, which hadn't really been in play here. as well as that President Trump has won re-election, it gives them an opportunity at the appeals level to say, hey, we don't even need to hear this yet, this appeal, whether she should be on, because now that there's all this other context, the trial court should be the one deciding whether or not this case should even be in court before we hear an appeal on whether or not Fani Willis should remain on the case. So I think it gives the appeals court an opportunity to kick it back down to the lower court and have that issue sorted out. Judge McAfee, many observers looked at it and said he was up for re-election. And he laid out the roadmap, but then essentially moved the decision down to the appeals court for having her removed. He doesn't have that political specter hanging over him anymore. But another thing to look at, and I think this is quite interesting when it comes to the lawfare angle of this, is that, remember, this was all based off of President Trump fighting hard to try to win Georgia. He was calling election officials. They hinged on his language that maybe he said, find me 11,000 votes. And he meant that literally. Go out and find them instead of look at all the places you have. Are there ballots? And what you see...
What do we see right now? We see people
and that's
like
what
Casey
I wanted to
and
bring
others
up.
still not. And they got 30,000 votes plus. They've had courts say to stop counting, and they won't stop counting. And now it's again at the Pennsylvania court system. So they're flouting court orders in these counties.
And Mark Elias, who's the attorney leading the charge, that's a Clinton lawyer. He was kind of the architect of financing the Steele dossier.
Yep.
And he was one who put conservative lawyers on notice before the election that if you try to fight the results of this election, we'll come after your law license. We'll file bar complaints. He's the one now, maybe not explicitly saying the words, find the votes for this Senate candidate.
They're trying to count votes that were disqualified by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said stop counting those votes. So they are counting, at this point in time, under that court's order, illegal votes. So he is encouraging his clients to engage in illegal behavior, criminal behavior. That'll get you in much more trouble with the bar than just interesting theories about the electors and should we do a recount and were things done properly here, because it was a messy election, as everyone saw. What happened when we got election integrity restored in America? We didn't hear about a lot of complaints. Little things that did happen were handled. The RNC had plenty of attorneys out ready to go. I think just on election day, they had to file 12 different pieces, and they've done 12 more to make sure in some areas where voting machines didn't work early on that were Republican area, heavily Republican vote districts, that they got a couple more hours. As long as it was closed, they got added. And then in some districts that were, again, trying to stay open, even though they had clear times of what time you had to be in line and did not face those kind of issues. So I think that's why it slipped around. We heard it for 4 years that we were the election deniers. They are literally out still denying the election results in Pennsylvania as we speak. And a two-term senator is still holding on because illegal votes are being counted in a few counties that hopefully, yet again, the courts put a stop to.